This is a purple square. It blinks, and if you wait too long, it burns out. Somehow, that blinking square turned into 600 lines of code. Hello, I'm Nathan. I've spent the last 20 or so years climbing the corporate ladder, going from an intern to an engineer to a manager, and then now a manager to a director. And I've been doing that for the past little over a year or so. And it's been exciting. It's been a really great career, and I've learned a whole lot along the way. I had little offshoots of jobs where I would dip into program management, dip into compliance, dip into all these different aspects and facets of growth within the corporate America, both in enterprise environments and in startups. One thing I've always been interested in and always wanted to do was video games. I've played video games my entire life. Starting way back from Commodore 64 days all the way through all of the systems. I've played Commodore 64, Atari, Nintendo, Super, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, no matter what, and then even the offshoots, so the Sega Genesis and just random different systems. No matter what, I've always been an avid gamer, and that actually helped me in my engineering career. Like, one of the very first things I ever had to do was learn how to do networking so that I could play StarCraft and Halo with my friends back in the day. So that's what launched me into engineering in the beginning, and I spent a couple decades doing that. I've always wanted to build video games, or wanted to try to build video games, and this past weekend I spent a lot of time actually doing that. And it was kind of by accident that happened. I was having coffee with a friend on Friday, this past Friday, and I was explaining to him how I always wanted to create some sort of not legacy piece. That sounds really weird, but I always wanted to create like a book or like a series of videos that explains what I know and my knowledge base around just the industry. So how do you get promoted throughout this chain? Since I've been there and I've kind of done that. If you're looking for like going from an engineer to a manager, or a manager to a director, what types of things would be expected of you, and then also like how do you present yourself with all that. And so I was playing around with a few different ideas as far as how to present that information. And one idea was you just create a bunch of YouTube videos about it. So I did a little bit of streaming as well. And I could never get around, just the anxiety around always having to be on, always having to stream. So that didn't really pan out very well. So then I switched over and decided to try to write a book. Like, everybody in the industry, everybody in the startups write books. So that's where my next natural inclination was. And I was like, okay, let's go write this novel, write this book. And as I was explaining this idea and concept to my friend, like, I could feel myself get bored. I was like, oh man, I don't want to write a book. So like if you yourself, when you're explaining something and when you're explaining like a creative project, if you ever feel like it would be work or boring, like, I just took that as a huge sign to say like, hey, maybe I shouldn't actually be doing this. So during that conversation, when I had that realization, I just stopped, thought about it for a minute, and I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to build a video game. Growing up, it was always just out of reach. It was, something that people over in California did. And if I wanted to build video games, either California or Japan, because I love Final Fantasy series, if I wanted to do that, I would have to move halfway across the country. And back then, I was terrified to do those things. So I opted to go the engineering route, and I'm very happy with my career and like those choices and what I've made so far. But as I was explaining it to my friend, I was just getting more and more excited around the possibility and ideas of building out this world, building out this like a universe. So I decided that, we had a long weekend this past weekend through Memorial Day. It was that Friday. So I just directly went home. I had off, directly went home, and then proceeded to spend 12 to 16 hours a day for the next 4 days learning Godot or Godot. I forgot how you pronounce it, but learning the application that I would need to run the video game, like dusting off my old programming knowledge, as minor as it might be, and wrote around 600 lines of code just on vibes. That's funny. I always see those videos of people. Well, not always. I started looking at videos of people that are just starting at game dev, and you see that cutscene where it says, "Hey, I had this square box, and then all of a sudden I had this other screen that was just fully polished." And something similar happened in my case, where I started with this box, and I just had a very simple loop that would damage the little box, as far as every so often it would get hit with stress, because I wanted the game firstly to center around just the mechanics of stress and morale, and how do you recharge. And I wanted to put a little coffee mechanic where you drink a cup of coffee in order to regain morale. So I started off with this little box, and then soon it became this, which is just from snapshot from purple box to this inside of a weekend, was pretty cool. I was able to put in a lot of work to it, especially, but also it wasn't nearly as hard to replace these assets as I had assumed. Right, so like this teammate one asset was just a drop in. This used to be just a purple box, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, let me grab some art, let me throw it in here, and just for a like concept of like a flipbook concept, basically. Like I wanted to dump the player into the scene as if it was already occurring, and then work out the mechanics in sort of like a middle out fashion, if you will, where I wanted all the mechanics to be functioning and working. Here, we're gonna slide some of this over. I realized I'm taking over my screen. It doesn't matter. But I wanted all the functions to be working and functioning correctly alongside the player. So, the loss of morale was key. The work product or customer work, it's like, okay, I wanted that functioning. The collision box capsule around the sprite, like all of this stuff, I just took it as like a step-by-step basis, right? So I went from this purple box to the interim step was this little screenshot where I just, I had purple boxes here. I dropped those in for other art assets, and then I added on game mechanics one at a time. So this game over status page when you lost, or these click to revive icons were when the purple box would go all the way down to 0, and I was like, well, what if I wanted to revive the character? And I built out that function. I built out, oh, what if we wanted to put defenses around the character so that it would limit the amount of damage that it took. So step by step, I took the core loop, the core mechanic, and just kind of worked out one at a time, and then ended up with a script or a stress timeout button that was pretty extensive. It was like 100 lines or so of code that would just go through and check all of the statuses and just like identify the stress waves. Then I had some sort of like a playable game where I could show it off to my friends. And so I just showed it to everybody that could. And that's actually why I started creating these, is because I think I'm annoying people now that I'm excited and showing people all these mechanics. But, just figuring out these little tweaks here and there, and making the game like feel playable, feel like really important as you go. And there's audio mixed into here. Maybe what I'll do is just to overlay like an audio. I don't know if it's capturing it. No, I don't think it is. But, I just had all these objectives, and, using really bad graphics to highlight the buttons, and really just kind of figure out like the different mechanics that I wanted within the main scene. So it was really just a step-by-step process. Once I had the stress timeout, and once I had the stress loop going, everything built upon that, right? So it was like, okay, first you have the stress timeout, then, I wanted a play and a pause and quit button as an example, because throughout the period I would have to stop and think about different aspects of the characters or of the design. So I wanted that squared away. You want to show defenses, trigger cutscenes, maybe. Each one of these functions kind of built upon each other, and pretty soon at the end of it, I had my 600 lines of code. Is it the cleanest thing ever? Absolutely not. Am I reusing functions in certain places that I probably should group together? Probably, but it's not bad for not having touched an IDE in 3 years. So I'll take the win. I don't have to defend my coding. I'm not a software developer. The middle out approach really worked well for me. I just sat there and coded on vibes, coded what I wanted to do, coded what I felt right at the time to code. I didn't stand up and have like this big design documentation. I was just playing the game, and every loop that I played, I wanted to figure out something to do with the character. And that really helped, especially around the momentum aspect, being like, oh, I wanted to figure out this mechanic. I want to do this thing. Okay, I need to figure out the mechanic. I need to write some code in order to get that to work. Oh, I need an art asset to play it. And I even went through an entire design period where I was just getting frustrated with the way that the characters were looking on the screen. So I went through and just had like a little art session with ChatGPT, and it went through a whole bunch of these different models and different art scenes and different looks, just to get like a vibe of like what I wanted the world and what I wanted the environment to really feel like. So I have played games my whole life, Commodore 64 all the way through modern systems, but it does feel really surreal and kind of fun to build your own. I was very surprised that I had not a good game, not a it was semi-functional and buggy, but it was just very interesting to me to realize how fast, how quickly you could go from zero to something within a weekend if you really dedicate the time and just sit down and say like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. Right now, I'm treating this as more of a creative side project. I do have a full-time job, full-time responsibilities. I have a little corgi that I need to walk all the time. But it's been a lot of fun just diving in again to some code, to some art. Game development just seems to be this mix of all these different disciplines that I've at least tried to hone or try at or practice at over the years. So it's just a lot of fun mashing them all together and say like, hey, let's build a game. I think moving forward, I'm going to try to nail down a little bit more of the art style. I want to play around with 2D, 3D, pixel art. I saw a video by, I believe his name is Adam, with a game called Insignia, where his art is just beautiful. So I wanted to just look through different art styles, different palettes, different ways to represent the story before really locking it in. And because I've done like program management and project management, I've already spun up like a project tracker. I can show you that real quick. So I spun up this project board just to keep on top of everything. New ideas were coming to me faster than I could code them out or test them out. So I just wanted a place where I could store ideas. So I spun up a little Scrum slash Kanban, and my idea with the devlog is to follow just like a very lightweight Scrum schedule. And then that way we could review, okay, how many points did I complete within 2 weeks, or just mainly stay on track with all these different activities that I want to do. And I made the project public. That way anybody who's interested can follow along in its development. But then also I can keep myself accountable, saying like, okay, I have these objectives to hit. We're 80% of the way there. I have until June 10th to complete it. So we're doing really good on this initial sprint. But to be fair, I already had a lot of points kind of banked on things that I already built, and I just wanted them in the tracker. So there was a little bit of a bloat here, where in reality, next sprint and the next few sprints, we're going to identify how much work can I do as a solo dev, especially with all my other responsibilities, and then just get realistic around those timelines. Because I know myself, especially when I take on like a very large project or a creative side, I need to have structure or else I get really burnt out where I'll just keep working 14 hours a day. And then after 2 months, I'll be so exhausted that I have to stop. So hopefully this is going to be a better, more healthier way to manage my work, because it would be really funny if I got burnt out over my creative project around discussing and talking about burnout and how you grow within organizations. And this is really helpful too, right? Because when I'm going through different loops of the game and when I'm thinking about different aspects I want to build, if I see a bug that would distract me away from what I'm currently building, I just log the bug and keep going. So I just put together and I log the bug and I'm like, okay, yep, that's a good bug. We're gonna pay attention to it. I throw it here in this backlog. And then I'm like, okay, we can just keep going, right? So, cleaning up website graphics or add a negative sound with not enough points. These are elements that I've been thinking about. I just put them in the backlog, move about my day. And then when I get to a place where I'm ready to plan my next sprint, I can take from this backlog and add it to the sprint. So I'm using things I know and knowledge that I know just in my everyday life to help me manage and mitigate this creative side project. One positive benefit to all of this is that since starting, I've cut my phone usage down by like 90%. I barely watch TV. I watch like a couple of episodes a day and then I go to bed. Whereas opposed to before, I would, have this habit of getting really stressed out at work, logging off work, rushing through a workout, going on the couch, either doom scrolling or watching TV. And so this has been really, really healthy, at least, to mitigate that. What I am doing is I'm trying not to be like overly hyped about it. It's a really fun creative project right now, and I want to like manage my own expectations and mitigate my own burnout, because it would be really ironic if I burnt out on a game about corporate culture and burnout to then burn out myself. But just taking a lot of experience that I've had and knowledge that I have around like, how do you manage yourself? How do you manage teams? How do you grow within a business or an organization? Rather than writing a book, I figured I could write a game and then tell the same stories. But for me personally, the game building is just so much more fun. So I want to enjoy the process of me writing or of me building this and then share the information that I have with you in the world. So if you're into satirical games, corporate culture, corporate chaos, comedy mixed with maybe some helpful skills, I don't really know how this is going to work. Stick around and I will see you in the next one.